In episode 24 of Mobycast, we dive into a new micro-series on Docker tips and tricks. Welcome to Mobycast, a weekly conversation about containerization, Docker, and modern software deployment. Let's jump right in.
Welcome, Chris, Rich. It's another episode of Mobycast.
Hey.
Hey, John. Hi, Rich.
Good to have you with us today. So, Chris, you're back from vacation. Are you feeling rested?
That's a simple question with a complicated answer. So TLDR is fitty-fitty.
Nice. Did you get robbed or anything horrible happen on your vacation, or was it pretty smooth sailing?
No, not at all. I mean, this is the happiest place on earth. We were at Disneyland, so it's all good.
Good deal. How about you, Rich? What have you been up to this week?
I played a round of golf yesterday, or was it yesterday or 2 days ago? 2 days ago, I think now. Shot a 116. First time I've ever recorded scores, so that was a goal of mine for the summer. So I think
that is just awful.
You said 116?
Yeah.
Was that a basketball score?
Yeah. So funny thing about we use the phrase oh, that's par for the course so liberally, and par for the course is pretty impossible. So par for the course is 72, and I shot a 116 just to give you
right. Yeah, no, I'm
perspective of how bad it was.
How much room for improvement you have.
That's the best. I've been thinking a lot about it. This is probably the happiest I'll be because I'm not any good, and so my expectations are not really all that high. But I'm such a competitive person that once I get to about 100, I have a feeling that I'm just not going to be happy playing golf anymore, because at that point I'm going to have expectations that, are probably either unrealistic or unsustainable. So that's
plan on it. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
So, yeah, and over here, I already mentioned this to you, Rich. It's been interesting fighting Facebook on behalf of one of our clients. Facebook has because of Cambridge Analytica, they're doing some new business verification stuff in order to get certain permissions for their apps. So we're just trying to get, a list of the user's friends, that users can see their friends that are also members of the app that we've created. And, nothing nefarious there, but just getting that permission requires a business verification. And Facebook has been the worst. They just deny every document we send over, and we're sending over real copies of articles of incorporation, business certificates, tax ID numbers, everything. And they just flat out deny everything with no indication of why. I have no idea. Maybe the document's not even coming through on their end. I have no idea. No idea. And I've been talking to other people about it, and everybody's saying the same thing. Yep, that's been happening to us too. So that's super frustrating. So if anybody's listening and having the same trouble with Facebook, I feel your pain. But today we're going to talk about not Facebook. We're going to talk about Docker, and we're going to go back to the well of DockerCon talks, because these have been fun to review and go deep in. And we're going to talk about tips and tricks. So Chris, what was the title of this talk, and who gave it?
Yeah, so the title of this talk was Tips and Tricks of the Docker Captains, and it was presented by Adrian Moat.
Cool. I have not heard of Adrian. And you know anything about him?
Neither had I. I believe he's a chief scientist at Container Solutions.
Interesting.
And if memory serves me, he might be from England.
Okay. So
across the pond, I believe, right. But I could be wrong too. So if so, I apologize, Adrian.
So. Yeah, in a tips and tricks format, I imagine, was there an overall message to his talk, or was it just more of a list of here's some things that have been working well for me?
Yeah, so this was absolutely a grab bag session. It was literally just, hey, here are a bunch of things that in day-to-day use of Docker that you may very well, they're common things that trip folks up, and these may be very useful to you. So maybe to back up a little, Docker Captains. So the Docker Captain program is a kind of a program run by Docker where they kind of officially recognize experts in Docker within the community, and then they kind of serve as evangelists for Docker and for helping folks out. So they're very active with blogging and giving presentations and speaking and whatnot, and really just kind of being the folks that are just experts in this space, helping other people learn about Docker and to take better advantage of it. So Adrian is in that Docker he's a Docker captain in that program, and this particular discussion was just I think based upon his own things that he sees in his work with other folks, as well as he obviously spoke within the group of Docker captains and kind of pooled their particular experiences and what they saw as like tips that would be particularly useful. So gathering that information, kind of put together a hit list, a grab bag of topics, and that was what this talk was based on.
Great. That's interesting. I was unaware of the Docker captains. By virtue of this podcast, we are now assistant Docker captains. Well, we're assistants to the Docker captain.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, maybe we get an assist. Maybe this might be an audition, right?
Right.
This is our audition tape for can we join the Docker captain program?
So let's just jump right into some tips and tricks.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, not really an overall unifying theme here, just a grab bag collection. So starting off with one of the first things that Adrian talked about was volume mounts.
Our favorite topic.
Indeed. Yes. I mean, it's definitely a very popular, common issue where, we talked about this before, where it breaks the container purity, where you're now sharing information outside that, you're punching that hole inside that container bubble and sharing information with the host. There's lots of good reasons for doing it. But you also just have to understand what the ramifications are when you do that. And in particular, he pointed out a particular gotcha with volume mounts that it's a little obscure. Probably most people won't run into it, but it is pretty interesting. And so what it was he went through kind of an example of showing this in action. And so in his example, he starts a container, and in that container, it specifies a volume mount. And in the volume mount, what's being mounted is actually, it's a file. And so in this case, he was starting a container running Nginx the web server, and the volume mount was pointing to index.html, which is the default homepage, if you will, for Nginx when it starts up the display. So that volume mount was being shared between the container and the host. Once that was running, shows you can go and cat the file on the host, and it says something like, say, Moby rules, and now you can curl to your container, and when you do that, it returns back the HTML that says Moby rules, and so that's exactly what we expect. Then the next thing he did is outside the container on the host, use your favorite text editor to go in, change that index.html, now change it to something like Gordon the Turtle rules, save it, and now curl to your container, your Nginx instance on your container again. And what do we expect that's going to say?
In a perfect world, we'd have Gordon.
Right. And so, obviously this is a gotcha. So, what it does say is it actually just says Moby rules, right? So we changed the file on the host that volume mount was pointing to, but the container does not see it whatsoever, right? And so the reason for this, any ideas why this happens?
Well, I just assume that the container is holding on to the file. It's just, and when it's a directory, that's fine. But when it's a file, that's not fine. And it's keeping a cached version of it inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of essentially what's going on. It's with Docker, the volumes are mounted at the inode level. So it literally has to do with the guts of the file system, how it works. And so it's mounting at the inode level, and text editors are saving to a new inode. So that original inode still exists. It's pointing to the old one. When the text editor creates a new version of file, that's a new inode and doesn't see it. So that's why this happened. So again,
that feels like the kind of thing where it's like, hey, open source developers, here's a bug for you. Go, get your name on a project. Go fix this. Like return an error when somebody tries to volume mount a file because it doesn't work. So at least warn people.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because it is probably one of those things where like when it does happen, most people are going to be like just banging their heads against the wall. Like, what is going on here? Just really not understanding it and kind of flailing around a little bit.
Hey, this is Rich. You might recognize me as the guy who introduces the show, but is pretty much silent during the meat of the podcast. The truth is, these topics are oftentimes incredibly complex, and I'm just too inexperienced to provide much value. What you might not know is that John and Chris created the training product to help developers of all skill sets get caught up to speed on AWS and Docker. If you're like me and feel underwater in these conversations, head on over to prodockertraining.com and get on the mailing list for the inaugural course. Okay, let's dive back in.
So that's something to be aware of. Lots of ways to get around this. Like obviously, you can not mount at the file level, right? You can mount at the parent directory level, and then you'll be fine. You can also change the file other ways. So again, most text editors are saving to a new inode, but if you do something like just overwrite the file via like echo or something like that, so you can do like echo Gordon the Turtle rules and then redirect it to your index.html to overwrite it. That would update the file as well because the inode's not changing, right? So
interesting.
So definitely different ways around it. But again, I think the real lesson learned here is just understanding that these volumes are mounted at the inode level. So be aware of that.
Cool.
Yeah. So the next thing to talk about would be, he pointed out to just beware of latest as a tag. And there's nothing special about the latest tag. When you push or pull or build an image, you can specify, you have the name of the image and then you can do a colon with a tag name. And so a lot of people, you'll just say, oh, I always want the latest, so I'm going to go get my image :latest. And, the point here is that there's nothing special about that term latest. It is not guaranteed to be new, and it's not guaranteed to exist even. It's just the default tag name when you don't specify a tag.
So if you never specify a tag, then it maybe works the way you would expect.
Kind of, but it and that's where this is kind of where one of the more typical gotchas I see with this is that is when caching comes into play. So when you pull an image, Docker is just gonna the Docker engine on your local machine is gonna look to see whether or not that image and the tag that you're asking for exist in its local Docker cache. And if it does, if there's a hit, then it says like, hey, I got it. This is cached. I'm just going to go ahead and use that. So the problem is that if you're using something like my image :latest, you go and build the Docker image like on your CI server, publish it as latest, and then you go and pull it onto another machine. If that machine already has my image latest because it did a previous build and a pull,
right,
it's gonna see it as like, I don't need to go get it because it already exists. So even though the one that the CI server built, much newer, latest bits, you're not going to get it. So that's why just be really wary of using the latest tag and really understand like what it means. It's much better to use meaningful tags. So like here at Kelsus, we'll use semver on our tag. So whenever we publish a new Docker image in our CI server, we're going to use major, minor, patch, semver as the tag name on that image. You could also use a git hash, a commit hash code as your tag name, but just something that's unique so that you're not going to get these collisions that lead to unpredictable results when you run your Docker images.
It sounds like another opportunity for an open source developer, Docker Captain, to do some better. Just get in there and put in a pull request for better warnings, and then maybe the Docker team eventually could look at deprecating the idea of latest, because life's too short to have to remember things like this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, just makes up for better, everybody.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not sure why it works this way, because it kind of feels like it would be a pretty simple feature add to Docker to do like a just a hash comparison. So like go and on
implement the feature.
Just on the repository when you're asking for latest, like find out like, or timestamp or hash code or something like that, and use that to see whether or not they're different.
Right.
As opposed so truly, implement the full caching thing, and so do the caching at the file level, not at the name level.
Right. So rather than help people not rely on latest because it's broken, let them rely on latest because it does what they would assume that it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it is useful, right?
Yeah. And as somebody who's been developing software for a long time, it's just so frustrating when things like this that are gotchas have to be disseminated through the community, as opposed to just fixed in the software. But I guess it happens once people start using the software, and depending on features, if you change what those features mean or do underneath them, it requires a committee of people to approve and think about it and all that stuff. Unfortunately, we have to stop now because we are just up against the wall in terms of other things that we have going on today. So maybe we can come back to some more of these tips and tricks next week. We'll leave everybody on the edge of their seats, wondering what the next thing is that is going to make their lives easier when they use Docker. Thanks, producer Rich. Thanks, Chris, again for another fun episode.
Thanks, guys.
See ya. Well, dear listener, you made it to the end. We appreciate your time and invite you to continue the conversation with us online. This episode, along with show notes and other valuable resources, is available at mobycast.fm/24. If you have any questions or additional insights, we encourage you to leave us a comment there. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week.